Hadith about this too, if you were to go to Tafsir al-Tabari regarding to the ayah of the Quran about the believing men cannot marry the mushrikat until they believe, right? And vice versa. There's a hadith related to this ayah that says that we can marry the women of Ahlul Kitab, but their men cannot marry our women. So there's a hadith. So if you accept this hadith, then this speech of Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is mafrood. Like it's incumbent upon us that we accept this. Therefore, we can't just use our own personal ijtihad to say we just have an idea that can like what's called naskh, that we can just abrogate the speech of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So let me stop with that, and we'll have a later on question period. I need to let Nadia speak. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brother David. At this point, I would like to introduce Nadia Vazi. She's an educator at the Arab American National Museum, a graduate from Eastern Mennonite University with an MA in Conflict Transformation and Peace Building with a concentration in trauma healing and peace building. Nadia just returned from Washington, D.C., where she completed research for the first online encyclopedia of peace building with humanitarian policy and conflict research at Harvard, and in partnership with the United Nations Peace Building Support Office in the field of psychosocial recovery and specifically conciliation. She's currently completing a postmaster's program in marriage and family therapy. She has been lecturing nationally at universities, corporations, and government agencies for the last 8 years on the Arab world, the American Arab experience, Islam and women in Islam. Nadia has been featured in several documentaries, including the award-winning PBS documentary, Muhammad, Legacy of a Prophet. Nadia is a third-generation Arab American and currently resides in Canton, Michigan. Please welcome Nadia to present Engaging the American Psyche.
Can you hear me? Okay, so that's slightly dated. I was in DC a while ago and I've since returned. So to just clarify, so to bring us to the point of engaging the American psyche, we first need to define what psyche is and what psyche means to all of you. So let's get that part out of the way. What's psyche? Yeah.
How do people think?
Exactly, it's how people think. So psyche comes from the Greek, which means soul. Some people say it means mind. And when we say to engage the American psyche, we have to be really careful when starting this conversation to not make this an us and them. We are a part of the American psyche by default of being Americans. And as soon as we say and we make this an us and them conversation, what we've done is we've dehumanized and we've taken away commonalities that would allow us to further any sort of conversation. What we need to do first of all is look at an American discourse and American history so that we can better understand the way things work the way that they work, the way we have policies, the way things just are in America. And to do that, we really have to look at not only the history of America, but specifically our immigration history. So how many of you know about the immigration history of America? A little bit, somewhat. Okay, so it's what? You have who first comes to America? What is that image? What does it look like?
Native.
Okay, so Native Americans are indigenous, and then the first people we attribute to being in America, some people would say Spanish, but for the most part, the general American discourse has the image of the pilgrim, right? So if you look like that, you're kind of good to go. You're all set. You fit the discourse of what it means to be American. And then after that, we introduce immigration laws. And the first time we have a major immigration wave is what we call the Great Migration, which is 1880 to 1924, where the gates of immigration are open. But they're open based upon a classification of race. And now we have a new construct of race, right? So some people say race is something that doesn't exist. It's nothing more than a social construct, but racism does exist. And then you have other people that say, no, race is real. So who knows what Arab Americans are supposed to be racially classified as? White Caucasian. You could be black and be Arab. My friend's mom is a black Arab. She's supposed to check off she's white Caucasian on the census? Does that make sense? Kind of, sort of, not really at all, right? So we're one of the few countries that still, our history is deeply rooted in that of race. So you have all of these people that are allowed to come over to the United States between 1880 and 1924, and then all of a sudden the US is a little bit too diverse, and that's kind of a scary thing. So we shut the gates of immigration. No one's allowed to come through from that point in time until post-World War II, except for Western Europeans. And then the 60s come along, and we have Civil Rights Movement, and along with the Civil Rights Movement comes the Hart-Celler Act. And it's this Immigration Act that's going to abolish all forms of immigration based upon national origin. And then meanwhile, you have this discourse of race. And in addition to that, we're introducing an idea called liberal multiculturalism. So if you don't know what liberal multiculturalism is, I want for you to write it down. Liberal multiculturalism kind of comes, does anyone in here remember the bicentennial? Heard stories about it, anything like, okay. So, I don't want to detract, but basically there's this idea that, okay, America's really diverse. How are we going to get to know each other? Let's do it through food. Let's do it through music. Let's do it through seeing what other people dress like. But if we're going to get to core issues of people's struggles, we've gone too far. That feels uncomfortable. Okay? So what does it mean? It means you can engage someone, but just at the surface level. Because it's easy to get to know someone over a plate of biryani. That's okay. But you want to talk politics? Ooh, that's a little uncomfortable. Because it's going to challenge the discourse of liberal multiculturalism. So liberal multiculturalism is basically saying you got to go deeper. And it should feel uncomfortable. And so we have to piece all of this together, and we have to ask, what are we going to do with it? We all have a different worldview. And our worldview is made up of this cognitive lens that we have. And we all see the world in a different way because we've all had different experiences. My experience speaking to you is that of a third-generation Arab American. I can say when someone says, you know, go back home or something like that, I can say my grandparents were born in Highland Park. My great-grandparents came to Cuba over 100 years ago. You have to know your story. You have to know your narrative. Because it's easier to circle through truth through stories. Americans love stories. Do we not love to read books and watch movies? Do we not love to go on the news and hear that enduring story of the person that survived? We're not so much a fan of the victim. We're a fan of the victim who survived and persevered. What's your story? What's your soundbite? Oftentimes when we're engaging and we're in conversations, we have this tendency to say too much in an answer because we get so excited that we want to explain everything. We can't explain everything. It's pretty universal that people's attention spans are kind of short. So we have to think about what you want to say. Sometimes you can say it in a story. In addition to that, know your audience. Who are you talking to? I'm talking to predominantly a group of college students, right? So the way you're going to engage other people is going to be very different than someone in corporate America. It's going to be very different than the community organizer or the school teacher or someone who's already in a professional career. Know your audience. If you're in a classroom, what does that mean? A classroom